Failure is a constant, right? Failure happens daily sometimes weekly. But it's just kind of the magnitude of it, you know? It's really about what's at stake. And I think for me, coupled with failure is this notion of ownership versus accountability. You know, accountability is what we should strive for. You get given a set of tasks, you've got targets that you need to achieve, and you're held accountable for those. And that's a fair value exchange. Ownership, on the other hand, is when you beat yourself up for failure. When you blame yourself, when this chorus of voices in your head wreaks havoc, because there are quite a few voices, right? All of us have a judge in our head, we have a critic in our head, we have a pessimist in our head. And very often those three voices drown out the optimist. So failure for me could be as simple as the way I show up in a coaching conversation. A team member lets me down, and I get upset, and maybe I even raise my voice, instead of using it as an opportunity to coach, right? So that's not how I want to show up, so I consider that failure. Then there's also failure where, you make this amazing TV commercial with a fictitious Zulu king drinking a beer, and then the real Zulu king goes to the opening of Parliament and says, SAB has insulted me. I didn't endorse their brand, I don't drink alcohol, and they use my Royal Zulu salute without my permission. Epic failure. So,
True story, by the way.
True story, yeah. So me and the CEO of SAB and the head of marketing and the CEO of the advertising agency had to fly down to KZN to apologize. And it was an incredible 2-hour session with the late Zulu King where he took us through the history of the Zulu nation. And within the first 10-15 minutes of this incredible lecture, we abandoned our arguments. Because we realized we were not going to win this conversation. But it was incredible, and it was very magnanimous. And we explained that, listen, we were trying to teach people culture. The ad could have been in any language. We made it in Zulu. We used the Royal Zulu salute to educate people on how to address a king. And he's like, I get that, I appreciate it, but in future, just ask, just consult. And I learned, you lose nothing from consulting. You lose nothing from listening more than you speak. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for that reason. You lose nothing from constantly looking for insights everywhere, right? So, and when you don't do that, you fail. And there's also been moments where I've kind of made the wrong, bets, wrong choices, and realized afterwards that I wasn't pursuing my life purpose. I was being expedient, and that happens. And then there's this thing called imposter syndrome that we all experience on a daily, if not weekly basis, and that's linked to the voices in your head. So understanding what our triggers are helps us to identify what's going to happen. So this is a trigger. I get triggered when this happens. I get triggered when that happens. Or when I hear these words because I've got a thing that I'm carrying. Just understanding what's going on. And very quickly listing all your thoughts and all your feelings. They're all negative. I feel like a failure. I feel useless. I feel I'm going to lose my job. My boss doesn't rate me. Everybody thinks I'm stupid. And then you drop these lists and you force yourself to come up with tangible evidence to prove those things. And 9 times out of 10, there'll be no evidence, which suggests that it's a figment of your imagination. And I'm not downplaying the challenges we carry, but we must take responsibility for the negative self-thoughts, the negative patterns in our minds, and understand where they come from before we will obviously, do something about correcting them. And then you make a choice about how do you move forward. Now that you know that this list is not true, what's going on? What are my triggers? How do I prevent the similar sort of, downturn happening tomorrow? And when you start doing that, the first time it might take you an hour, 2 hours. Eventually it becomes a couple of minutes. Eventually it happens 5 minutes before you give a talk. Now I do a lot of talks, I do a lot of media interviews, and I've learned that the 15 minutes before any of those talks or interviews is sacred time for me. I protect myself from everything, no phone call, no conversation, because there are triggers in life. It's super, super important to guard the personal space around you, to preserve your positive energy, to preserve your flow, because how you show up is something you can control just by being purposeful around guarding your space.